Truth and Tea with the Urban Evangelist. Welcome to Truth and Tea with the Urban Evangelist.
I am very excited today. I think it could be the fact that it's 1st of March and we are marching into the Women's Month. And, it's just a time to just appreciate and celebrate all that we are as women and, his unique design for us, and just really embrace that and bring it to the fore. And so today's episode is one that I think will encourage every woman out there, because it's all about being able to rise up when life just, throws so many things at you that you feel you don't even know where to begin to pick up the pieces from. But yeah, a little more about that after I introduce my guest. I am the Urban Evangelist. Welcome to Truth and Tea, the podcast that filters life through faith. And joining me today is a beautiful lady that I've grown, to know and love on a personal level. She's a marketing guru, marketing enthusiast, but she's also done some great things for me as the Urban Evangelist in terms of managing the brand. Her name is Sandra Phiri. Welcome to the show, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me in front of the camera this time.
Right, exactly. You're always so busy behind the camera and behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But I thought to throw you in front of the camera this week because you've got an incredible story to tell. And I would love to use your story, as a propeller to just help someone who's struggling with what's on their plate right now and what's on the table. And it's not, a sob episode in that, of course, we're dealing mostly with life after loss. But for me, it's just to celebrate how you've, walked your journey with such grace, with such strength. So much so that I told you that, you remind me of a modern-day superwoman. You don't have to wear a cape to show your superpower on a daily basis. So just a brief background. Sandra lost her husband and she lost a daughter within a short space of time. You lost your husband first.
I lost my husband first in 2017.
2017.
November, yes.
After having been married for 3 years.
For 3 years, yes.
And then shortly after that?
Shortly after that, from my lens, I feel I've experienced loss in this short space of time 3 times.
3 times.
Because our daughter had a heart problem. Then my husband died in 2017, November. And then 2 years after, she had a brain injury. So I look at that as I lost her because after the brain injury, she was not the same child that I had before. So technically for my daughter, I feel like I lost her twice. So in 2019, she had the brain injury. So I lost this version of her that I knew and was warming up to the new one. Then I lost her the final death in 2021, November as well. So yeah, it's been a lot.
And I think it sounds easier to say that you lost them perhaps within a 4-year period.
Yes.
But for you who's experiencing it, you kind of lose sense of time.
Exactly, totally.
My time and what you are going through, in that moment.
It's a lot, yeah.
Are very different.
Very different. I remember I had a car incident recently. So as I was talking to the traffic officer, because the car is still in my late husband's name, so he mentioned, the car is not in your name. I was like, oh yes, it's not. So I said, then he said, then we'd need the person who it's in the name of. And I was like, oh, that's my late husband. And he was like, it's been 5 years. Why didn't you get it changed? And it's only then that he mentioned that it hit me. I was like, it actually has been a long time. Because my son, whom when he was dying, I was left 3 months pregnant. Will be turning 5. So if you were to look at it as a life, it's a whole talking child. He's walking, he's doing everything. So it has been a long time, and I also didn't realize it until someone mentions it. Then I'm like, oh, it actually has been a lot, but a lot has happened that I honestly, for me, I have moments where I'm still in 2017 and I'm talking to the doctors and they're saying a few hours after I take my husband into the hospital that he's already brain dead. So I have moments when I'm there, then I have moments when I'm with my daughter and they're saying she has a brain injury, or these moments when okay, she's dead. So it's everything, I can't really tell them apart sometimes. Yeah.
So I'll take you right back to the very beginning. I remember when I heard about your husband's death, I knew him as Jackpot.
Yes.
I knew him as the creative
The
brain
creator.
behind Pompey's video
videos,
Silence,
yeah.
because I'm a huge Pompey fan, and to just being finalized, I think,
Yeah,
if I'm not
yes, yes, it
mistaken,
had been,
and
yeah.
just to hear that, you know, the talent behind this video is not with us anymore. It was very sad, you know, to learn of the news.
Yeah.
But then where I'm going with this is that I've come across a quote that says that, you know, when you lose a husband, there's a name for that, like you
Yes.
become a widow.
Yes.
But when you lose a child, it's so inexplicable
It
that there
is.
isn't a term for that yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just memes until you experience
Exactly,
something.
until you're going
So for
through it.
you, would you say there's been a distinction in how you've dealt with loss as a spouse and loss as a parent?
Well, like I would liken it to like having kids, because I experienced having both kids. And I know there's people who always say, I'm not quite sure about the whole favorite child thing.
Right.
I think they're all unique in their own way, and you love them, all of them.
Yeah.
You love all of them. Like if you have more than one kid, you love all of them in their own unique way, not that you love one more than the other. So for me, I would say they are, like I can't really say there is a distinction, but the stings are a bit, not really different. I guess the heaviness of it sits different, for lack of better terms, yes. But it still borders within the same thing, like how you can't say you have a favorite child. It's the same, like how there isn't one that I would say is greater than the other, but
Right.
the stings are obviously, yeah. And for me, it's blurry because for my daughter's death, it happened like there was a lot of other things that happened before she actually passed on. So maybe it's the number of things that also led to her death that make it hit a whole lot different. Yeah, because there was a lot of faith. There was a lot of hope. There was a lot of, because when I went through my husband dying, I had a period where I was mad at God and I was not talking to him. And then very
Would it be
quickly,
around that period when he died?
yes. So
Okay.
because what had happened, like when my daughter got sick, then the first time the doctors saw her from South Africa, they said, you can't do anything to help her because you brought her in late apparently and all of those things. But then God saw her through everything and her healing was quite quick compared to the condition that she had. So God like brought her through this and there was a building of faith. Like it was just the relationship that we had with God. And now that I have grown in the experience, I appreciate it now because I feel even when my husband, by the time he was dying, there's a relationship with God that he had that was unmatched. He knew God as the God who answers prayers and he comes through. Like there was just a building of relationship that was just crazy. But then for me, it was a whole 360 very fast because from coming up there with God can do it, he's able to, he'll always provide, he'll always heal, he'll always do that, to your husband just dying after a few hours of saying he has a headache. Then I was lost. I was like, what? Why? What's going on? What happened? Because in my mind, after they had mentioned that this is the condition your daughter has, there was thoughts of, if we do the surgery, what if she dies? So when it came to death, of course the thought of death came, but never for my husband. Like he was the last person I would have ever thought would die. In my mind, I never saw a 28-year-old dying. Like it just, it couldn't register. Yeah, like, and from a headache. So it never registered. So there was that period where I was like very close to God, and then my husband died, then I detached. But then again, very quickly, as a way of healing, and that's what helped me, I got close to God again. Yes, and
So
then
when your husband died, you were pregnant.
I was pregnant, yes.
And then you're also dealing with your daughter's condition.
Exactly.
With
Dealing
the brain
yes,
injury.
the brain injury. So I knew that I was not going to be able to do this on my own, and I needed God because really he's the only one that I've ever known for the longest, and I just, you're the only one who can help me. So there was me getting back to God and regrowing in the faith and all of these things happening, and then my daughter's condition kind of getting better and then getting worse. So there was that shift in my relationship with God. And then because of all of these things that I went through, because I saw him come through for me, all of that hope, I held it on to, she's gonna be fine. Like I never, like it now moved from me being scared, like, oh, the next surgery she might die, because she kept on having doctor reviews every 6 months, and then there was talk of having surgery again, like in the next 2 years. It moved from being because I saw God provide for my children, and I had like a self-delivery. I always thought I was going to lose my child, my son, that is. So I was like very focused to say, this is going to work and she's going to heal. That is the path that I was on because I'd seen God bring me through. So I said, there is no way she is going to heal. Then when she died, it was just a whole different thing that my head had to process. Yeah.
How old were you when your husband died?
I was 26.
You were 26.
I was 26.
You were very young.
Yeah, I was.
And to have a term like widow placed on you at that age,
it was
how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so like I don't know if I could term it, because I think there's different phases to when things are happening to you, you're going through different phases. I know the internet and people have all of these stages of grief, and I disagree because grieving is not, and healing also is not linear. There's moments I wake up and I feel so much better. Sometimes it could go on even for a week. I feel like I'm so much better, I'm in a better place. I think the certain steps I've taken that have brought me to where I am, and then it will just be one small thing that triggers me, and then I'm back folding again on the floor and just trying to get a hang of what is all of this that is happening. So for me, I never even took off my ring after my husband died. So the whole widow thing is something that even someone to say it, yes, I couldn't even process it. It was too heavy for me. In my mind, there would be times and moments when I was convinced my husband would pop up from somewhere, somehow. I kept my ring on, and I kept my Mrs. Sikanyika, because I'm Sandra Phiri, but he was Sikanyika, so I was Mrs. Sikanyika. Like even when I'm going for work and there's interviews or I'm meeting a client, I'd always say, hi, I'm Mrs. Sikanyika, and I'd have my ring on. And I think there was a lot of denial also, because I think maybe for a greater part, I thought maybe healing is just to sit on the pain, to not deal with the pain, but to just sit on it, tuck it away, and it will somehow go away. If in my mind it's not true, then let's move with what's in my mind. Yeah, so, yeah.
And how long did it actually take you before you removed your wedding ring?
I removed my wedding ring in 2020. That was 3 years.
3 years later.
3 years after my husband died. And that was after my daughter had the brain injury, because then after she had the brain injury, she lost like all motor skills, all cognitive skills, everything was gone. She was not able to talk. She wasn't able to swallow her saliva. She couldn't recognize me. Like I went to the hospital with a child who couldn't shut up. Like all the nurses knew her and all the doctors knew her, to leaving that place to a child who could not do anything at all. So then initially when it happened, and always as my first response, I was like, God, because God is the one I have always known. So then I also had a period where I have never prayed for anyone as much as I've prayed for my daughter. Like I went all out. I was fasting, I was praying, and then that in itself got me closer to God. And then that started to shift my perspective, because I realized in that moment that, and I've heard this before, I think I had a conversation with a friend about it, about how sometimes when something similar keeps on reoccurring in your life, it's because God is trying to teach you something and you're not getting the lesson. So I kept on dealing with loss, and I was trying to understand, like, God, what do you want me to do? How should I position myself? What am I doing wrong? Am I not praying enough? So I then realized very quickly that it was that I was not letting go of my husband, and I was not completely bearing myself open to God, to rely on Him totally. So I took that shift, and that is how I then removed my ring, because I said, look, God, I am yours. I get it. I am yours, and I'm not going to hold back. You're my husband. You're my provider. You're my protector. You're everything. So then that is the moment when it became a bit easier for me to even take off the ring and for me to stop calling myself Mrs. Sikanyika and all of those things. It's only when I got to that point when I was able to do that. Yeah.
Was it like, so it was a bit symbolic for you to take it off?
Yes,
it marked
was.
The next step,
exactly.
to say,
exactly.
in your journey with, dealing with grief.
Dealing with grief, dealing with loss, dealing with this new thing that has happened.
Yeah.
That was really like you said, it was like a next step of my life. Because then even, I hadn't been to church since my husband died. I hadn't been to church. Then after I took off my ring, I think there must have been like in probably August. In September, I was back in church. I even started to, like I did a foundation class and all of those things. Yeah, so then I was growing into what I think I had gotten to a place where I had a bit more, for lack of better terms, peace and a better understanding of maybe this is what God wants me to do. Maybe this is how I should position myself. Maybe, so it was a bit easier and clearer for me at that point in time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get to more of that in a few minutes, but I want to take you back to, the time I gave you a call and just trying to get the timeline right of the losses. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something that really stayed with me. You said, ever since the losses, you seem to have blanked out on certain parts of your life.
Yeah.
So I just want to know, what has been the impact of your losses on your physical well-being? What did you go through?
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's amazing how the body reacts to you when you're emotionally upset. And that's a thing that I didn't know because, it's been a lot. I have lost my hair a lot. Like, I remember in 2020 itself, if not 2021, I just literally had to cut everything and start afresh.
It just started falling off.
I had chunks, like you could trail me in the house.
Really?
Everywhere I sat, when I'm getting up, there would be hair. So initially when it started, I thought it was because I was pregnant. So the postpartum, I went through it with my daughter, with Alexis herself. I went through it. My hair started to fall off after, I think about 3 or 6 months after I delivered. So after I had my son, I said, it's postpartum. And then I was trying to treat it the same way that I had treated it with my daughter. And then it just kept on getting worse to lack of sleep. So I've always suffered though with insomnia, but then it became worse because after my husband died, I had a period where I just couldn't sleep.
To insert another follow-up question to that, I'm the sort of person, and not to make this about me, even if we're in the house together, as long as he's not in the bedroom, in the bed,
it's hard
I can't
to sleep. Yes,
so exactly. I can imagine now that he's gone, how much more that was heightened.
It was so bad. And worse, I was, like you mentioned, between my late husband and I, he was the one who was more on the physical touch bit. So he'd always want to be around you. And I got used to that. It was easier for me to live like that. So there was processing that, and then there was just me being pregnant and uncomfortable and just wanting someone to be there, and all of that wasn't there. So there was the insomnia, there was the loss of hair, there was the drastic weight loss. It's weird, and people don't even believe me now, but I was obese at some point in my life. I was really big.
I find that hard to believe.
I know, and a lot of people don't, but those who know me know, I was really big. So, I never got as big as I was when I was younger, but then obviously there's just a time when, especially after my son was born, I had to literally stop breastfeeding him because I was just losing so much weight. There was the weight loss, there was the hair loss, there was the insomnia, there was my skin breaking out. I had moments where I was just feeling sick, my whole body would just be sick, all the time. And I'd go to different hospitals and they'll just be like, maybe you're stressed, maybe, So there is a lot that happens to one's body when you're going through something emotionally. I've seen it.
And medically, were there any solutions that were thrown your way, which sometimes tend to, I know there's some people that have an issue, especially in Christian circles.
With therapy.
With therapy, with taking antidepressants. Were you given any of those solutions that, could have helped
Could have helped.
you?
Well, not necessarily. Also because I think I have gone for therapy, I would say roughly 3 times, but then also I never completed all of these sessions. So the first time was after my daughter had the brain injury, when Alexis had the brain injury, so the hospital organized someone to, have these therapy sessions with me. So I only had, I think, about 2 with her, and I wasn't comfortable because, again, I think stemming from this place where you think as a Christian it's not really the right thing to do, So I was never really open to it.
So it didn't feel right to
It didn't feel right for me to do it.
So you couldn't get the
really
help
right, but like
because-
I didn't think it was necessary.
Okay,
In my
okay.
mind, I was like, I'm praying about this, and God is going to work it out. So I don't really think I need you to do this. In my mind, that is what it felt like. But then when I started going to church, our church provides, they have a therapist there as well. So one of the pastors said, you know what, and they also talked to me about therapy in a way that I understood that God has blessed so many people with so many talents. The Bible talks about it. And he uses these people to help you. So it will not be just you getting, it's the same way like you're getting a Panadol because you have a headache.
Yeah.
Your emotions will also need that sort of attention. If you see someone, like we're both sitting and I'm bleeding, you'd want to do something to help it. And when you take me to the hospital, do something to treat it the same way. It's the same with our emotions. You experience loss, you're going through a divorce or something. Somewhere, somehow, your emotion is bleeding. If you equate it to it being a physical thing, you're bleeding somewhere, you're hurt somewhere. Why can't you go to the hospital and get someone to see it and give you the help? If it's a Band-Aid that has to go there, if they have to clean it up first, medicate it a little bit, and then put the Band-Aid, is the same process with therapy. So when I started to look at it in that lens, I then understood, I said, I think this would be helpful. And I had 2-3 sessions, and then my daughter died. So then now it took me back
took
again.
you back.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I like where you've left us, though, in terms of the conversation that we're having. When you talked about, when you can see an outward wound,
Yes.
it's easy to do something about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And it takes me back to the difference between mourning and grieving.
And grieving, exactly.
And I now understand why the Bible says, mourn with those who mourn.
Yes.
Because mourning is, an external
Yes,
expression.
it's almost like a
it's
byproduct,
outward,
yes,
exactly.
yes, of
So it's
grieving.
easy for someone to mourn with you because I can cry with you.
Yes.
But when it comes to the aspect of grief,
It's
that's
different.
like an internal wound
It's an internal
that no one
wound.
can
No,
help
you're-
bind
Yeah.
up. Have you been good at exposing what's on the inside?
No, I haven't. And it's something that I have struggled with for a long time. And that's one of the reasons why, like even for, like we had a whole fundraise for Alexis for her health. She had the brain injury in 2019. Even my best friend did not know she had a brain injury. That's how...
Really? That's how closed up
That's how closed up I am. Yeah. Or I was, rather, because I'm working towards it. And it's amazing now that I get people say, because I'm very open about my story now and my journey, there's moments when I have a bad day, and I will share it, because I'm thinking if there's someone out there who's going through this and they have been in a place like mine where they feel they have to go through it alone, or they're the only ones, because grieving and loss and all of these things and just life's hardships have a way of tricking us into believing we're the only ones going through it, and that we're not seen, we're not valued, we're not heard. So I was never the type who's open about anything. So I kept that for a very long time, and that is the reason why we only did that fundraise 2 years after she had the brain injury.
The fundraise was in 2021.
The fundraise was in 2021. She had
And,
the injury in 2019.
I remember that,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you've touched on that, because it's one of the things that I was, coming to.
Yeah.
Just, finding that courage to go public, with the fact that this is what you're dealing with your daughter.
Yeah.
But at the same time, also, put together, a funding pool to be able to get
Yes.
her the help that she
That she
needed.
needed, yeah.
Where did that courage come from? Because it's not the easiest thing to do, and I will ask a very hard question here, in that there was also funding
Yes.
that was required. It
Yes.
can't be easy to ask for help,
No.
especially, from public and well-wishers.
And also the type of person that I am.
That you are,
or that I was.
based on
because-
what you're telling me.
Exactly, yeah. I was the kind...
Where did that courage and boldness come from?
When I tell you that when we ask God for something, we must be very careful. I read something once that said when you ask God for strength, don't expect to have some strength that will come from somewhere. You will go through an experience that will literally drag you, and it will require you getting up for you to know you've actually gotten that strength. I was the kind of person who, I have people in my phone book who, in an instant, I would ask for something and I would have it in 1 minute. They were that willing to help me. They would even, I have friends who just send me the money or send me help without, because they knew the kind of person that I was. I remember one time, after, like, my son was about 2 weeks old, and he's a winter baby, so he was born on the 23rd of May, which was the same day that my husband and I got married.
Wow.
So yeah, he was born 23rd May, and like 2 weeks into it was June. And what I didn't know is that the where I was working, they did agree. They got me when I was pregnant, so I had to go on maternity leave real fast. And they said we were fine. But what I didn't know is that they were going to half my salary. So when it came, I had already at some point paid my daughter's school fees. So the way I had budgeted it, I was short on, like, I didn't have electricity that night. I had a phone full of contacts of people who could help in a heartbeat. I could not text anyone to ask them for help at all. I slept in that cold house with a 2 weeks old baby and one who has a heart problem because I just couldn't ask for help. That's how bad it was. Like, it was cold, like I was freezing, and in my mind I kept on thinking, Sandra, do you think this is worth it? And at that point, I told myself, I said, God, this is pride. You've talked about pride, and I need you to help me deal with this. It was just what to me seemed like a very short prayer. It wasn't even anything necessary. And 2 years down the line, I found myself asking the whole of Zambia for help. If there is something that would deal with pride, it's that. Like, it'll put you in check with your pride real quick, because you're literally telling people you're going nights without eating. You have moments where you don't have any money, and you're just telling you, look, this is what's happening. It's not the easiest of things. So for me, it took a lot. It took a whole lot. And I think it was just God, really, because I'd never seen myself ever doing it. Apart from me asking for help and telling people that I'm actually struggling, it was also people will now see what Alexis is like now. Because I think in my mind, I hadn't really fully processed it. People always knew her as the talkative girl. There's a certain way that she was in at some point, and then now she was, for lack of better terms, disabled. So I was like, people will now know. So there was all of those things, but then again, what I learned from this process was God was just, I think the relationship between God and us, the relationship He requires of us, is for us to be vulnerable and open. I think this is something that I had been a Christian for a very long time, but I feel there's certain things we tell ourselves as Christians, that I need to act a certain way, or I can't have days when I don't have faith because it's not Christ-like, but God already knows these things. So if you're not bringing it, if you're not telling Him, like any relationship, like I was married before, and I know one of the things that strengthened our relationship, our marriage, was how close and vulnerable we were with each other. I'll talk about like having a child, for example. There's times when I know my son has done something wrong, because he'll come to me, and just from his body language, I can tell that there's something. Yeah. So sometimes I'll ask her, so what did you do? But sometimes I'll just keep quiet and see if he's going to tell me. And I think God wants that from us. Like, He wants us to tell Him. He knows that there's something wrong. He can see it, or He knows, but He wants you to bear yourself open. You're not happy with Him, tell Him. There's something, but tell Him whatever. Like, for my, like, I call myself God's favorite daughter, because God even knows He's tired of me. Like, any minute, anything, like I will just, like, we're friends like that. And it was a process for me to get to that place. And there's certain things that others would term as courage, but it wasn't even for me, it wasn't from me, it was God helping me do that. So I prayed and said, God, let's deal with this pride, and there it was.
And it's amazing how I think there was an overwhelming response once you put it out there. And that is what I didn't
see. Like, I never thought, because in my mind I said, it's a lot of money and people want help, but then I would have told my story, and I've told people that I'm going through all of these things for nothing. But had I known sooner, I always tell myself, and it's one of the things that, like, I regret.
How many days did it take to raise the whole number? Just 3 days. Yeah, because I remember I was keeping tabs on that, and it amazed me how quickly the help came through. And how much was raised in 3 days?
We raised about 450,000 kwacha.
Which was enough to then send her for surgery.
To send her for surgery, and it helped us also get some equipment that she needed to, like, better herself. So, like, to better the condition that she was in at that point in time. So after that happened, then I realized that we were actually able to get this help. I wish I'd done it sooner, to get her the help sooner, because I did see how much of a great difference it made. But then, we did the fundraiser in March, and in November she died. Yeah.
Did you ever feel misplaced guilt because you delayed?
Yes, a lot. Even now, till today, I have moments where I'm just like, ish, I didn't do enough. And people will say, you did a lot, you literally, sorry,
It's okay.
I'm getting emotional.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay.
People will say, you did a lot, you Okay. Yeah, so people say I'm strong, and they say oh, you did a lot, and you put your whole life on hold for her, but I feel if it was enough, maybe she'd still be here. So yeah, there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of guilt and regret. I feel maybe if, we had known sooner, because when she was a baby, she'd breathe a certain way, and we didn't notice it. We didn't know. Yeah, so there's so many things, there's so many emotions that I get to deal with every single day. I would be on she's healed now, she's not going through any pain, she's okay, so it should be okay, to why did she have to go through all of that? If God knew it was going to end in death, it wasn't necessary, especially the last 2 years of her life. He shouldn't have let her go through all of that. Yeah.
And it's amazing how I find some of what you've just said very relatable, because what I haven't shared with you is that in November, our daughter was in hospital dealing with her second hospitalization. And we used to pray for Alexis May, Lena and I. And, we were standing with you in prayer, as I'm sure a lot of people were, and I think we're so heavily invested emotionally, even without really knowing you then, as well as I know you now, because, I didn't know you.
Yeah, we did.
Then.
We did know each other.
And then when the news broke that, she died, we cried so much, Lena and I. We really cried.
Yeah.
And it was the following month that we also lost Lena on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
And when you say, that you feel she went through so much, and humanly possible, you made every effort, and only to lose her, it kind of makes you question, but then why go through all that?
Exactly.
So in that moment, what was your relationship like with God, and how did you pick yourself up from there to go back to having faith, trusting and believing all over again?
For me, it was just, I was like, you know what, God, I have tried. The first, like I mentioned, after I took off the ring, and I went back to church again, and that's the same thing that happened before she had the brain injury. After I lost my husband, I was getting to a place where I started to say, you know what, I lost him, this is what happened, and I was not really making peace with it, but accepting it. And I felt like I was in a better place in terms of accepting that this is what has happened, and I'm now moving forward, I'm learning from this pain. At the point, I thought that was the only pain. And then she had the brain injury, then again I went back. And then she, in the brain injury, I got the courage again and the faith, and I said, you know what, God, I get it. This is about you. We're going to do this way. I'm going back to church. I'm taking off this ring. I'm doing what? And then she died. So I even started therapy, because all of that was me being intentional about my healing and being intentional about growing my relationship with God. I went back to church, did foundation class, and then she died. And then I just said, God, you know what? That's fine. That's it. I get it. I guess you have people that you do these things for, and some of us that probably just would never be cut out for it. You have your own favorites, for lack of better terms. So you work with those. For me, I'm okay. It's okay. And I never wanted anyone to mention God. I had so many people, and then in that moment, I had people who started to judge me with how I was reacting or processing. So they're like, no, you can't. Like, I would have moments where I'm saying, but why did he? And others would say, you can't question God. As a Christian, you can't question God. You can't say that. I know you're upset, but you can't. So then that even just fueled the hurt even more. Like, I didn't want anything to do with anyone from church or anything. I just said, let me just keep to myself and let me do things in my own way, because it looks like God is not going to come through for me. He has his people, so let's just leave it at that. But then again, that was, I think, maybe sometime in like April.
April last year?
Yes, April last year. Like, I had moments where it still wasn't working. There's still a void that I was feeling. So because there's certain information that I already have in terms of who God is and what he's doing and all of these things, I knew the certain answers and the certain feeling that I needed, like to fill the void that could only come from him. So in that, I found myself inevitably going back to the word and then asking myself, maybe there's just something I haven't like properly understood. So, okay, maybe let's do this again, God. Like, let's try again. Because I'd even tried getting into, I think they call it the New Age thing, where they believe in everything. Because I had some friends who were telling me, there's the Buddhists, they heal like this, it'll help you heal, it'll help you do what. So I was trying it, but then it was even making me feel more displaced and more unease and more, like, lack of peace was even getting greater at that point in time. Then I knew within me something was wrong. I knew something was wrong, and then I just said, okay, let me go back, because the only way I feel this is right, the only way I feel like I'm almost myself is just back with him. And then I had to start regrowing the relationship all over again.
It's beautiful to see with, how passionately you're serving him now.
Yeah.
Like, that's just incredible.
Yeah.
Very quickly, has the thought of moving on, remarrying, having more children crossed your mind?
Like, before Alexis had the brain injury in 2019, yes. Like, I had the thought of, it had been 2 years since my husband died. So I was like, it wouldn't be such a bad idea, because I have moments where I tend to miss loving someone and them loving me back and the whole process. So I was like, it wouldn't be a bad idea to probably get into a relationship. And then she had the brain injury, so I had to go through my own things and also like helping her heal and all of those things. But then now, like, at this very moment, having a kid is what's like top of my mind. Like, it's like, I think there isn't a day I wake up and I'm not like, oh, it would be so nice to have a baby. Yeah, like, every time I see you with a bump, I was always like, oh,
so you're more
so
broody
nice.
than,
yes,
in need of a relationship.
Exactly, and that is where the problem is. I'm like, of course, the baby going to come from? But like, that's really, I feel the quality of humans have changed around in terms of dating. Yeah, because my husband and that is also one of the things, like, he was, I think, one of a kind. The way things are structured now, and it's hard to almost not really compare per se, but just coming from that place to getting to another one and just totally trusting who this person will be, it's like a very difficult shift for me right now, even just to process it. Yeah. Yeah.
You get there. Yes. When the time's right,
it will be
right.
Is right. Yeah.
Sandra, in closing, I just want you to look into your camera, and I'd love for you to just speak to a woman that's hurting, that's dealing with loss. And loss isn't just death,
Exactly. It's divorce.
It can be divorce, it can be loss of, a job,
Yes.
loss of your identity.
Exactly.
It can be so many things. But since we're talking about the ability to rise up, and you've done it under the most, grueling circumstances, you've actually done it.
Yeah.
and I want you to give yourself a pat on the back for that. When you're alone, just pat yourself on the back and thank God for the work that He's done. But I just want you to speak to a woman out there that just needs that push to rise up.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think the first thing is that I feel as when someone has created something, like if I create a machine, for example, I'm the one who's created it. I know how it has to work and how it has to run. Whoever buys it will always either need to read something that I've written down on how to use this machine or have to talk to me. So what I've come to learn from my own experience is that it's not really about you. It's about the story God is telling through you. And once you connect to God, everything will be so much easier. I know you're hurting right now. I know it's hard. But just be kind to yourself. Give yourself time and grow that relationship with God. And eventually, He'll be able to help you with strength that when He says, I'll give you peace that surpasses all human understanding, even I get to places where I don't understand how I'm still able to function and do what I'm doing despite everything that has happened to me. But when you do that, when you just surrender yourself completely to God, no matter how crazy it feels like right now, He is there. When you get to a place where you surrender yourself, things will be so much easier. And you're able to do it. You're able to rise up. You're able to fight and be able to tell your story to another person, because this is bigger than what you're going through. It's about helping out the next person who might be going through something similar to what you're going through right now. So, yeah, be strong, hang in there, and it's going to be okay.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for that and for just being on the show.
Thank you.
Catch us for the next episode. It's Truth and Tea, filtering life through faith.